Elon Musk refuses to apologize after a host tries to corner him. What he said next was chilling. It was a cold, crisp evening when Elon Musk walked onto the brightly lit stage of the popular late-night talk show, The Evening Edge. The studio, packed with an eager audience, hummed with excitement. Musk, in his usual tailored suit, walked toward the stage with the unshakable confidence that had made him a household name. His reputation as a visionary, the man behind Tesla, SpaceX, and countless groundbreaking ventures, preceded him wherever he went. But tonight, things were different. This wasn't just another interview where Musk would be asked about electric cars or rocket launches. No, tonight's host was Steve Parker, a journalist known for his hard-hitting questions and his knack for cornering even the most confident figures. Parker wasn't going to let Musk off easy. The air was thick with tension as Musk took his seat under the harsh studio lights. "Elon Musk," Parker said with a smirk, leaning forward slightly, his voice thick with anticipation. A man who's revolutionized industries, created billion-dollar companies, and still finds time to post memes on Twitter. Quite the figure, wouldn't you say? Musk chuckled, his trademark calmness evident. "I suppose so," he replied, his voice steady but tinged with a hint of amusement. "But I'd like to think of myself more as someone who's trying to push things forward, trying to make things better." The audience chuckled lightly, sensing the easy rapport that had already begun to form between Musk and the host. But the smile on Parker's face faded as quickly as it had appeared. He wasn't here to get comfortable with Musk. No, he had a reputation to uphold, and that meant putting Musk to the test. Parker leaned back in his chair, shifting the focus of the conversation. "Well, Elon, there's been a lot of buzz recently about some of your, shall we say, unconventional statements. You've made headlines more than a few times for your remarks on everything from AI to the future of humanity. But here's the thing, some people say you're starting to cross the line. They call you reckless. Some even call you dangerous. What do you say to that?" The audience stilled. This wasn't the usual lighthearted banter Musk was used to. This was a direct challenge, a question designed to rattle him, to make him feel cornered. The crowd shifted in their seats, their eyes glued to the two men on stage. Musk, however, didn't flinch. His eyes remained steady, his posture still relaxed. "I think it's important to push the boundaries," he said, his voice calm, almost soothing. "But that doesn't mean being reckless. If we're not challenging the status quo, if we're not thinking ahead, then we're not doing anything. Sometimes, people don't understand that kind of forward thinking. But that's okay. Progress often looks like chaos at first." The tension hung in the air as Parker narrowed his eyes, sensing a crack he could exploit. "But isn't that a dangerous attitude, Elon? To dismiss criticism as just fear of change? What about when your decisions affect millions of people? Look at Tesla, for example. You've made some bold claims about self-driving cars, but there's still so much uncertainty. Some say you've overpromised. Others say you've taken too many risks with people's lives. Can you honestly say you're not worried about that?" For a moment, Musk's expression didn't change. He leaned back slightly in his chair, considering the question, but his answer was immediate and unwavering. "I've never promised perfection. I've promised progress. And yes, sometimes things don't go as planned, but that's how innovation works. If we didn't take risks, if we didn't challenge the norms, we'd never get anywhere." People who say that change is too risky don't realize that the risks of staying the same are far greater. Parker was undeterred. "You're saying that failure is just part of the process? That's a pretty risky approach to running billion-dollar companies. There's a fine line between innovation and irresponsibility, Elon. You're walking that line every day." The audience could feel the underlying tension between the two men now. Parker's questions were no longer friendly inquiries, they were sharp, probing, as if he was looking for a crack, an admission of fault, something he could use to turn the tide in his favor. Musk, however, wasn't backing down. His answers were confident, controlled, each word calculated. "So, let's talk about responsibility then," Musk said, shifting the conversation back to Parker. You're a journalist, right? You understand the weight of responsibility when it comes to shaping public opinion. But you also know that sometimes sensationalism takes precedence over truth. How do you reconcile the need for a compelling story with the responsibility to report facts? And how do you handle the backlash when your reporting doesn't hold up? The host blinked, taken aback by the directness of Musk's question. It wasn't often that Parker, the seasoned journalist, found himself on the receiving end of such a probing inquiry. But the moment passed quickly. Parker adjusted himself, a smile returning to his face, but this time it was edged with something darker, a sense that the game was about to shift. "Touché, Elon," Parker said, his tone no longer playful. "But let's get back to you. You've built an empire on innovation, on challenging the world's biggest problems. But how far can you push before the world pushes back? I mean, you've faced criticism from investors, from regulators, even from your own board. Do you ever think about the consequences of your actions? The people who might be hurt along the way?" The atmosphere in the studio was charged now, the audience on edge. Parker had taken the gloves off, and Musk knew it. The question wasn't about innovation anymore, it was about the personal toll of that innovation. About responsibility. The question had shifted from curiosity to confrontation. Musk didn't hesitate. His answer was as chilling as it was resolute. "I think about the consequences every day," Musk said, his voice lowering just slightly, "but the consequences of doing nothing are far worse. People who cling to the past are the real danger. It's those people who are afraid of change that are holding us back from a future that's better for everyone. I'm not afraid of that. And I'm not apologizing for it." There it was. The moment the entire room had been waiting for. Musk had just refused to apologize for his actions, for his decisions, for the very essence of who he was. It wasn't a rejection of responsibility, it was a refusal to back down from what he believed was necessary for the future. The audience sat in stunned silence, unable to process the weight of his words. The host, for the first time in the interview, seemed momentarily speechless. And Musk, his gaze steady and unblinking, leaned back in his chair, almost daring Parker to press further. The tension in the studio was palpable, the quiet buzz of hushed whispers filling the air as the audience processed Elon Musk's chilling refusal to apologize. It wasn't often that someone stood their ground so unflinchingly, especially not under the scrutiny of an interview as high-profile as this one. But Musk wasn't your typical interviewee, and Steve Parker, the host, knew this. Musk had just set the tone, and Parker wasn't about to let the conversation slip away so easily. Parker's smile faded, replaced by a steely look of determination. The host had been in this situation countless times before, but this was different. He was determined to bring Musk down a notch. If Musk wasn't going to apologize, Parker would force him into a corner and make him squirm. He had his plan. And this time, he would make it work. "So, Elon," Parker began, his voice dropping into a more serious tone, "you've just told me that you're not afraid of the consequences of your actions. That's a bold statement, considering some of the risks you've taken. But I have to ask, do you really believe that? Do you believe that you're always right? Because you've been called out time and time again for some of your decisions. Critics say that your reckless behavior, especially on social media, has hurt Tesla's reputation. Do you regret anything?" There it was, Parker was going for the jugular. He had shifted the conversation from innovation to personal accountability, aiming to trap Musk into acknowledging that his actions had consequences beyond just the companies he built. The question hung in the air, daring Musk to back down, to admit fault. Musk's expression didn't change. He still leaned back in his chair, his body language relaxed, even as the stakes seemed to rise with every word Parker spoke. "You're asking if I regret my decisions?" Musk responded, his voice measured. "I think regret is for people who don't believe in their actions. Every decision I make knowing the risks involved. There's no innovation without risk, Steve. If we didn't take those chances, we'd still be living in the past." Parker wasn't satisfied with that response. The crowd could see it in his eyes, he was going to push harder. "So, You don't think your behavior on Twitter, your controversial posts, have caused any harm? Parker pressed, his tone almost accusatory. For example, calling the SEC's investigation into your company a witch hunt, or tweeting that Tesla's stock price is too high, or calling a diver involved in the Thai cave rescue a pedo guy. Those actions have resulted in millions of dollars in fines and a tarnished public image. Do you stand by all of them? Musk's expression tightened slightly. The room could feel the shift. The air was thick with the buildup of tension. The host had struck a nerve, and the audience was leaning forward, waiting for Musk's response. This was the moment when everything could fall apart for him. But instead of getting defensive, Musk leaned forward, his gaze sharp. I stand by my actions because I believe in the future, he said, each word deliberate. Yes, I've tweeted things that were controversial. Yes, I've made mistakes. But my focus is always on pushing humanity forward. If the world can't handle a little bit of disruption, then maybe we're not moving fast enough. The words were chilling, cutting through the air like a blade. The entire studio was silent now, the weight of Musk's refusal to back down hanging over them like a storm cloud. Parker shifted uncomfortably in his chair, trying to regain his footing, but it was clear that the dynamic had changed. Musk was no longer the one on the defensive, he had turned the tables, and now Parker was struggling to catch up. So, you're saying you don't regret anything? You believe that everything you've said and done is justified? Parker asked, his voice now tinged with disbelief. Musk didn't flinch. I'm saying that every action has consequences. But I also know that if I didn't speak my mind, if I didn't take bold actions, we wouldn't be where we are today. Tesla wouldn't exist. SpaceX wouldn't be launching rockets. We wouldn't be talking about the future of humanity. Sometimes, people don't understand the bigger picture, but that's not going to stop me from doing what I think is right. The host was momentarily speechless, his mouth open as if he was trying to find the right words to counter Musk's unyielding confidence. But Musk wasn't giving him an inch. He wasn't going to apologize for anything. He had already made up his mind, and his conviction was stronger than Parker's attempts to break him. The audience could feel the power shift. They weren't just watching an interview anymore, they were witnessing a battle of wills. Musk was standing firm, refusing to be bullied into admitting weakness, while Parker, the seasoned interviewer, was clearly out of his depth. Parker glanced down at his notes, trying to regain his composure. He could sense the interview was slipping away from him, but he wasn't ready to let it go. There was still time, and he had one more card to play. All right, Elon, Parker said, forcing a smile back onto his face, though his voice betrayed his frustration. I'll give you credit, you're a man of conviction. But don't you think your conviction sometimes blinds you to the real-world consequences of your actions? When you challenge the system, when you push so hard, don't you think you're alienating the very people you're trying to lead? Investors, regulators, even your own employees? Musk's eyes never left Parker's, and there was a certain coldness in them now, as if he was preparing for the final blow. I'm not here to please everyone, Steve, Musk said, his voice low, steady, and cutting through the tension. I'm here to change the world. And sometimes, that means making difficult decisions that others aren't willing to make. If that makes me unpopular in the short term, so be it. But in the long run, history will remember the people who made real change, not the ones who played it safe. The words hung in the air like a warning. Musk wasn't just talking about business, he was talking about the future, about legacy, and about the price of progress. He wasn't backing down, not now, not ever. The studio was silent, the audience hanging on every word as Musk's refusal to apologize rippled through the room. Parker, the seasoned journalist, could feel the tables turning. The host had expected to break Musk down, to find a soft spot, something to make the tech mogul sweat. But instead, Musk had not only remained unflinching, he had turned Parker's own questions back on him, leaving the host struggling to find his next move. Parker could sense that this interview was slipping from his grasp, but he wasn't ready to give up. The pressure was on, but he was determined to get the confrontation he had come for. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowed, searching for a final way to catch Musk off guard. All right, Elon, Parker began, his voice now more deliberate. You keep talking about progress, about challenging the system. But let's take a step back. Let's talk about your past. You've been involved in some pretty controversial decisions over the years, from the Tesla Model 3 production issues to SpaceX's repeated launch failures. People say you've had a hand in pushing companies too hard, too fast, without considering the long-term effects. Do you ever look back and think, maybe I've pushed too far? Musk didn't flinch, his gaze steady and unwavering. The question was designed to pull him into a moment of doubt, to make him question his past choices. But it wasn't enough. Musk had already faced far worse criticism than this. No, Musk replied, his voice steady, without hesitation. I don't think I've pushed too far. I've made decisions that some people didn't understand at the time, but every single one of those decisions has moved us closer to where we are now. Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, these companies didn't come to fruition because we played it safe. They succeeded because we kept pushing, even when things didn't look good. People don't see the long-term vision, they only see the immediate bumps along the way. Parker's face tightened. He had expected this. Musk's resilience was legendary, after all, but he still wasn't prepared for the cold, unapologetic truth that Musk seemed to deliver with such ease. This wasn't a man questioning his actions or waiting for validation. This was a man who was unshakable in his convictions, who believed in his future vision more than anything else. Well, Elon, Parker said, clearly frustrated now, you talk about vision, but let's look at the reality. There are real-world consequences. For example, the way you handle your critics online. Just a few weeks ago, you tweeted about the SEC again. People said that was an irresponsible move, considering the legal troubles Tesla had gone through. How do you explain that kind of behavior? Don't you think that a CEO of your stature should be more careful with their words? The question had landed like a sharp jab, and Parker wasn't backing down. He could see that Musk wasn't budging, but he couldn't help himself. He had to push harder. He needed to expose any chink in Musk's armor, any hint of doubt, any crack that might make Musk reconsider his bold approach. Musk didn't blink. He tilted his head slightly, his expression calm and almost predatory. You're asking about the SEC? It's a joke, Steve. The SEC didn't like the fact that I challenged them, so they fined me. But what they didn't account for was that I'm not afraid of being fined. I'm not afraid of the system. You want to talk about consequences? The real consequences are the billions of people who will benefit from the work we're doing. That's why I don't apologize for standing up for what I believe in. If you're asking whether I'm going to bow to the system, the answer is no. The coldness in Musk's voice hit like ice. It was the first time the host seemed genuinely caught off guard. Parker's jaw tightened, and he shifted uncomfortably in his seat, unable to hide the frustration creeping into his voice. So, you're just above it all, huh? Parker shot back, his tone dripping with sarcasm. You're above the law? Above accountability? I mean, you've made it clear that you'll do whatever it takes to keep pushing forward. But how far are you willing to go before you actually harm your companies, or worse, your employees? This was it, the moment when Parker thought he had Musk cornered. The question was a direct attack, designed to force Musk into an emotional response, a defensive position where he might slip up. But Musk, as always, seemed unfazed. I'm not above accountability, Musk said calmly, leaning forward slightly. But I won't be held back by fear of failure. If you want to build something that changes the world, you have to be willing to face criticism. You have to be willing to go further than everyone else. That's how innovation happens. And the people who work with me, they understand that. They know the stakes. So no, I'm not worried about harming my companies. I'm worried about not doing enough. About not pushing hard enough to get us where we need to be. The room seemed to shrink, the weight of Musk's words filling every corner. The audience could feel the shift, a profound moment of clarity that left Parker fumbling for words. He had started this interview hoping to expose a crack in Musk's unyielding exterior. Instead, he had just been given an unbreakable resolve that no amount of prodding seemed capable of shaking. The host paused for a moment, his expression faltering, but he was a professional. He quickly gathered himself, trying to push forward. "So, you're willing to push everyone around you, no matter the consequences?" Parker asked, now more quietly. "Do you ever consider the people who might not be as willing to follow your vision? The people who might get hurt along the way?" Musk's answer came quickly, without hesitation, as if he had been waiting for this very question. "The people who work with me, those who share the vision, understand the risks. They know what we're trying to achieve, and they know that if we don't push hard enough, we won't get there. Sometimes, people get scared along the way, and that's fine. But the ones who stay, the ones who understand why we're doing this, they're the ones who make history." The audience was silent, the weight of Musk's words hanging in the air. Parker had no response. There was nothing left for him to say. Musk had shut down every attempt to corner him, every question meant to break his resolve. And now, as the tension reached its peak, Musk sat there, poised and unshaken. The host sat back in his chair, unable to mask the realization that he had lost. His efforts to rattle Musk had failed. The interview had gone from one where Musk might be put on the defensive to one where the host himself was the one cornered. The silence between them stretched on, and for the first time that night, Parker seemed almost unsure of himself. And in that moment, the audience understood that Musk had won. His chilling words had shattered Parker's carefully crafted narrative. Musk wasn't just a businessman. He was a force of nature, and nothing was going to make him apologize. The studio was alive with an electric buzz, but it wasn't the excitement that usually followed a lively interview. No, tonight was different. The atmosphere had thickened, the energy now dominated by a sense of discomfort that crept in every time the camera cut back to Steve Parker. He was visibly flustered, his smile no longer the confident grin that had greeted Musk at the beginning of the interview. Now, it was a forced expression, barely masking the realization that he had lost control of the conversation. Elon Musk, unshaken and unwavering, had dominated the discussion, turning Parker's questions back on him with chilling precision. The host, once the one in control, was now struggling to regain his footing. Parker cleared his throat, glancing at his notes as if searching for the next question that would give him the upper hand. "You're a tough one, Elon," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The moment passed, and he quickly regained his composure. All right, Parker said, trying to sound more in control, "let's shift gears a bit." The audience was still on edge, sensing the host's desperation. The tension in the room had shifted. This was no longer a simple back and forth between two minds. It had become a battle for dominance. Parker, once confident in his ability to provoke, was now caught in a web of his own making. "Let's talk about the future, Elon," Parker began, trying a different angle. "You've always been optimistic, even when things seem impossible. You talk about Mars, about colonizing another planet. But the question that's always lingered in the back of people's minds is this: why do you think humanity needs to leave Earth? Are we really at the point where we're abandoning ship?" Musk leaned back in his chair, his expression as calm as it had been since the beginning of the interview. "I don't see it as abandoning ship," Musk answered. "I see it as taking the necessary steps to ensure the survival of humanity. Earth is fragile, Steve. We can't afford to put all our eggs in one basket. The risks of not making these moves are far greater than any short-term inconvenience we might face." Parker, sensing the ease with which Musk handled these questions, pushed harder. "But don't you think that focusing so much on space exploration is a distraction? There are pressing problems here on Earth: climate change, inequality, poverty. Shouldn't you be more focused on solving those problems rather than dreaming about Mars?" Musk's gaze hardened slightly, though his demeanor remained calm. "The problems on Earth are important, of course. But the future of humanity, of civilization itself, requires us to think beyond Earth. We have to solve these problems here, but we also need to ensure that we have a backup plan. We can't afford to just sit and hope for the best. What I'm trying to do is ensure that we, as a species, have a future." Parker nodded slowly, trying to mask his frustration with a smile. I understand your point, but it's hard for some people to see past the immediate concerns. The cost of these projects is enormous, and some critics say that you're wasting valuable resources. How do you justify spending billions on space exploration when so many people are struggling here? It was a direct shot, a way for Parker to reignite the emotional charge of the conversation, hoping Musk would crack under the pressure. But Musk, as always, didn't back down. We're not just spending billions, Musk replied, his voice steady and unwavering. We're investing. Space exploration has led to countless innovations that benefit people here on Earth. Solar power, battery technology, even medical advancements. These are all byproducts of space technology. Investing in space isn't just about Mars, it's about ensuring we can tackle the problems we face on Earth more effectively. The audience seemed to nod collectively, their respect for Musk growing with each calm, assured answer. It was becoming more clear with every response that this wasn't just an interview, it was a battle of ideologies, and Musk was proving to be an unmovable force. Parker's face tightened, frustration creeping into his features. He wasn't winning this. He wasn't getting the emotional outbursts or the weak responses he had been hoping for. The more he pressed Musk, the more he found himself being met with facts, with calm confidence, with unyielding resolve. His usual strategies weren't working. All right, let's change gears again, Parker said, his voice almost defeated, as if trying to regain some control. You've spoken out about AI and its potential dangers. But some say you've been too alarmist about it. That you're overplaying the risks. You've called it the biggest existential threat to humanity. Why should we listen to you on this, Elon? After all, you're a businessman, not a scientist specializing in AI. What makes you the authority on this? The audience could feel the underlying challenge now. Parker was taking a different approach, questioning Musk's authority, undermining his credibility. This was his last attempt to make Musk seem out of his depth. He was trying to imply that Musk wasn't qualified to comment on the very technology he had invested in, the very field he had been warning about. Musk's eyes darkened slightly, but his voice remained even. I'm not claiming to be the ultimate authority on AI. But I've worked with some of the brightest minds in the field, and I've seen firsthand the dangers we face. If we don't regulate AI, if we don't set guidelines now, we could end up with a situation that we can't control. I've warned about it because I care about the future. The truth is, if we don't take action, we're leaving the door open for something far worse than we could ever imagine. There was a chill in the air as Musk spoke. His warning wasn't just a technical argument, it was a passionate plea for the safety and security of future generations. The room, once filled with tension from Parker's aggressive questions, now seemed to listen intently, hanging on Musk's every word. Parker, no longer sure of how to regain control, let out a small sigh, the energy in the room shifting. The host's frustration was evident, but there was nothing left to do. He had tried everything. He had pressed Musk with accusations, with traps, with personal attacks. Yet, every time, Musk had responded not just with composure, but with an unshakable authority that no one, not even the host, could rival. Well, I think we'll have to leave it there for tonight, Parker said, his voice quieter now, almost resigned. Elon Musk, everyone. Musk stood up, his demeanor as calm and collected as it had been throughout the entire interview. As he walked off the stage, the audience applauded, not just for the achievements he had built, but for the way he had handled the interview. The host had failed to break him, and in the end, it was clear who had won the battle of wills. The interview had reached its climax, and there was an eerie stillness in the studio. The air was thick with the residue of the tense back and forth that had unfolded. Steve Parker, once so confident in his ability to provoke and undermine, now looked like a man grasping at straws. Every question he had thrown at Elon Musk had been met with an unshakable resolve, an answer that seemed to knock the wind out of him each time. Now, Parker sat back in his chair, staring at Musk, who appeared as calm as ever, almost like a force of nature, impervious to the pressure of the situation. Parker could feel the defeat in the room, but he wasn't ready to let it go just yet. He had one last shot to regain control, one final attempt to make Musk flinch. He leaned forward slightly, his voice taking on a sharper edge, a final jab designed to provoke some kind of emotional response. "So, Elon," he began, his tone more calculated than ever, "you've made it clear that you won't apologize for your decisions, no matter the cost. But here's the question, are you really prepared to live with the consequences? What happens when everything you've worked for backfires? When your gamble doesn't pay off? Can you honestly look at yourself and say you're willing to risk it all for your vision of the future?" The question hung in the air like a ticking time bomb. Parker was searching for the crack in Musk's armor, the moment when the visionary would finally admit that his arrogance had consequences, that the pressure of his own unyielding drive might be too much to handle. But Musk didn't flinch. He didn't even seem to register the bite in Parker's words. Instead, he sat back in his chair, the faintest smirk playing at the corners of his lips. He didn't need to answer immediately, he knew exactly how to respond. "You're asking me if I'm ready for failure," Musk said, his voice low but steady, every word calculated. "The truth is, failure is inevitable. No one succeeds without failure. The real question is whether you can learn from it. Whether you can get back up when things fall apart. And I don't fear that. I've made mistakes before, and I'll make them again. But I won't apologize for trying to change the world, for pushing boundaries. That's why I'm here, because I'm willing to fail, but I'm also willing to keep going, no matter what." The chilling calmness in Musk's voice was unmistakable. There was no hesitation, no second guessing, just an ironclad resolve that sent a shiver through the audience. Parker had no comeback. He couldn't argue with Musk's determination, couldn't question the conviction that burned in his words. In that moment, it was clear, Musk had already won. The host, visibly shaken by the sheer force of Musk's presence, tried to shift back into a more neutral tone, but it was too late. The damage had been done. "Well, I think that's all the time we have tonight," Parker said, his voice lacking its usual sharpness. "Elon Musk, everyone." As the cameras began to fade out and the audience erupted into applause, the finality of the moment settled in. Musk stood, giving a slight nod to Parker, then turned and walked off the stage, his every step a testament to the confidence that had carried him through the entire interview. There was no doubt now. Musk had not only refused to apologize, he had completely dismantled the premise of the interview and left the host without an ounce of authority. The camera zoomed in on Parker, whose face betrayed a mix of frustration and disbelief. He had tried to corner Musk, to provoke him into an emotional response, but instead, he had been outmaneuvered at every turn. Musk had shown the world that no amount of pressure or criticism would make him back down. It wasn't arrogance, it was conviction. And in the end, that was far more chilling than anything Parker could have anticipated. As the lights dimmed and the crew began to pack up, Parker sat in silence for a moment, staring at the empty space where Musk had stood just moments before. He knew he had been part of something far bigger than just an interview. What had started as an attempt to challenge Musk had turned into a masterclass in resilience and unshakable belief. Outside the studio, Musk was already on his way to his next commitment. The interviews, the headlines, the debates, they would all follow him, but it didn't matter. The conversation had shifted. The world had seen him for who he truly was, a man willing to take risks, to challenge the world, to never back down. And in the days that followed, the clips of Musk's chilling final words flooded social media. People were talking about it, his refusal to apologize, his unwavering commitment to his vision. Some called it arrogance, others called it brilliance, but no one could deny the power of his words. Elon Musk had taken control of the conversation, and now the world was paying attention. And for those who doubted him before, there was no longer any question about his determination. The world was watching, and Musk had proven, yet again, that no matter how hard the world tried to corner him, he would always stand tall, unshaken by the pressure.